Hi, afternoon everybody. My name is Theresa. I'm a jewellery design student. Well, ex-student. I've just completed my Masters at the National College of Art and Design. I did an MA in metals, and I'm just going to be talking to you today a bit about the work that I did for the project. I was utilising 3D printing as a form of rapid prototyping technology. I'll speak to you a bit about 3D printing itself, and then again about go more in depth into my work and what I did with the project. Just a little bit of background about me. Sorry, is everything off the screen a bit? Okay, it's okay. I was born in South Africa and I lived there for 16 years, and then I moved over to Dublin, finished my education, and I moved back to Cape Town to do my undergraduate studies in jewellery design. I was there for 5 years, and then I moved back now to do my MA, which lasted 2 years. So the beginning of the project was late 2010. I was encouraged by my supervisor at college to look into rapid prototyping technology, specifically 3D printing, because the NCAD as well our department was expressing quite a lot of interest in this new emerging technology, and I was incredibly interested, very curious about what I could do with the technology, yeah, it sparked my curiosity, and once I started, kind of it led off. A little bit about 3D printing. It's a 3D printing. The type of 3D printing that I was using is called SLS printing. Basically, what it is a form of additive manufacturing. So kind of think of the opposite of laser printing and CNC milling. You're building up a three-dimensional object. The way that the printer worked that I used for most of the collection was that you've got a whole bed of powder and a laser, and it reads your CAD model that you've built, and the laser goes through the bed of powder, and it slowly but surely fuses layer by layer this three-dimensional object that you've designed. There's a lot of buzz about 3D printing. There's been huge steps that have been made into it. It's been around for a good couple of years, but just recently this type of technology has become far more accessible to pretty much anybody. Like Louise was saying, the internet's made it incredibly easy that way. So they're 3D printing human veins, 3D printing food. A really fascinating one is just the kind of leaps that they've made as far as the medical device designs and medical implants. One great example is that with medical implants, the porous kind of design, honeycomb structure that you get, that's able to be 3D printed. It can be accepted by the body far easier because of that porous structure. And there's a lot less chance of the body rejecting that implant as well. And these objects can be specifically designed for an individual's body through 3D printing. This is just one of the 3D printers that we have upstairs at the department at the National College of Art and Design. It's actually a resin printer, so I didn't end up using it a lot in my project, but I would use it a lot for kind of test designs. The reason why I couldn't use a specific material is that it's quite brittle, and it wouldn't work for a wearable jewellery object. But it was great, as I said, for testing designs, which there was a lot of during the whole project. So you can just see there's an image of the one at the top there. That's all the structural printed material, and then you take that structural material away, and then you're left with your actual printed object. A bit about 3D printing. It's taken off as far as a lot of artists and designers and craft makers in the last 2-3 years have caught on. They're doing really incredible things with the work. This is a Dutch artist and jeweler called Ted Noten. It's his Miss Piggy ring. It's become really, really well known. And he made this ring in a really kind of fascinating way. I found he actually went the other way. He built the whole ring. It was kind of like a sculptural piece that he built. It was massive. It's about this big. And he actually went and used another technology called 3D scanning. Scanned that in, and then you ended up with this digital model that he eventually used to print. I, on the other hand, went to the computer after my design process and built the model up in a different way. So there's a couple of ways to use it as well. That's another version of his Miss Piggy ring. And then another designer is, she's actually a fashion designer, is Iris van Happen. She's worked with a number of architects and designers, and she does really massive collaborations each year, and she brings out very beautiful collections. This was from her most recent collection in 2012, where she 3D printed part of the heel, and then that 3D printed part of the heel has been reinforced with carbon fiber. So she's mixing a lot of, obviously, like hand techniques, traditional hand techniques as far as shoemaking and everything, mixing that together. So there's a lot of people that are doing some incredibly amazing things. The next is a very interesting company called Nervous System. They're an American company, and they're tackling it a bit differently. They've been able to set up a kind of a co-design system almost, where a user can log onto their site and design items that they've developed programs that allow customers to design an item, but they still retain their nervous system aesthetic and style within the piece. So they do everything from jewellery to homeware and kitchenware. I just thought it was a very interesting way to kind of take the technology. So a little bit about my project. I drew a lot of my inspiration over the last 2 years from the Zulu, primarily because I've always been absolutely fascinated with non-Western forms of jewellery. And obviously because I'm from South Africa, I've always been interested. And the Zulu are the largest African ethnic group in the country, and their ritualistic use of beadwork just really always fascinated me, and they have an entire structure to their jewellery culture. It's a jewellery that communicates primarily through the colour and shape, and their beadwork can display everything from their marital status to their placement within their society. It can convey thoughts, feelings and statements. Colour plays a massive role within the system, and it's developed a very distinct symbolic form of communication almost. Their repeated use of the triangle and the diamond and the shape formed like the basis for my collection's aesthetic. And the aim of the work, I wanted these objects to be wearable, functional pieces of jewellery. I was very interested in them being visually engaging and interesting, as well as being contemporary and aesthetic, but yet commercial in terms of price and accessibility. And the beauty of 3D printing is that it allowed me to basically do just that, because I had the choice of being able to do one-off bespoke items, or I could do a large run. Say, obviously I wouldn't be doing hundreds, but I would say do maybe 10 or 20 items. But the possibilities are endless as far as how many you can print. This is just an example of one of the websites that I used. I used 2 websites through the whole collection, or the whole project, sorry. I used Shapeways and Utilising. Shapeways is a Dutch-based company, and Utilising is a Belgian-based company. They've made it incredibly easy for someone to log on, to upload their CAD model, and click what material you'd like and print, and within 2 weeks it arrives at your doorstep. They even have kind of little programs that you can use on the site to design a pair of cufflinks or a ring. So you don't even have to have specific CAD knowledge. But obviously I used it just for the purpose of uploading my own models and printing away. It was quite a process getting started with the work. I had no prior experience with 3D printing itself. I had never come across the 3D printer. I barely knew how they worked. I didn't understand materials. There was a lot of research into materials, what materials would be wearable and usable as functional jewelry items. So that was probably the most tricky aspect after finding the companies that I was going to use. This is just a photo of what the pieces look like undyed. So I used white nylon for most of the collection. This nylon is a very strong, flexible, and lightweight type of polyamide. When it's printed, it's got quite a rough texture. It almost, like, people have seen the work and they almost compare it to kind of like a flocked wallpaper, that kind of texture. It can be polished as well, so it can be polished quite smooth. And it's quite a foreign material for people to use in jewellery, so I try to get the work shown as much as possible for people to come into contact with the work, to pick it up, to touch it, to feel it, and get as much feedback from them as possible. Because initially I was fairly unconfident about how people would react to using this in jewellery. And these are just some test examples. No first print was the final kind of design. There was always tweaking to be made, always changes to be done. This just shows you different types of resins as well. There's different qualities of resins that are available, obviously at different prices as well. And at the top there's just an example of a nylon print up against a silver cast of the same file. So it's the exact same file that's being used, they're just using a different printer and material. My process generally starts with all my visual research, and then I move on to sketching. I'll make some models, perhaps. I've used different methods of model making, from balsa woods to cardboards to CNC milling for some of the kind of complex ring ideas and forms, just to kind of get an idea of how they're going to fit. And then I will take it to the computer, where I had a slight previous experience with the software that I used. The software that we use is called Rhino. And this is just an example of what a finished ring would kind of look like in the software, on the computer, sorry. It's the same ring as that one at the top there. Just the side view. That's been printed in resin, so it's the exact same model. And this is an example of what the pieces, sorry, I think it's really squashed. An example of what the pieces look like after they've been dyed. And just a little bit example of some photos of my process. These earrings I did 3 earrings for the collection. They were inspired by there was a photo of a woman with very large earplugs. They're called amashaza. And they were only used for about 60 years while they were in fashion. And I really, really loved all the really strong geometrics, the colors that they used. The reason why they were so large, they went up to about 75 millimeters in diameter, was so that people could actually identify where you were from geographically. So they could see, like, oh, you're from such and such area or wherever. I love their form and their shape and everything, so I incorporated them into 3 pieces within the collection. And then I was a very lucky receiver of a materials grant award from Future Makers in 2011, and a student award from Future Makers as well. And this provided me with enough funding to be able to explore other material options within 3D printing. Something that I really was quite excited to start with was checking out wax printing and casting it into silver. So the hexagonal rings, they're all the same file, and they've just been printed in nylon and dyed, and then there's a silver cast from a wax print. And another aspect that I really loved, I was reaching a stage within the project as well where I felt quite a strong disconnect to the work, and I wanted to get back to the bench for a while. So this allowed you to be able to take it back to the bench, and you could do all the finishings and the sanding and the polishing. A lot of them I would blacken and then polish away some of the blackening. So that was great to be able to just bridge that gap for a while. Even the hand dyeing bridged that gap as well. I had a lot of fun to be able to play with colour for the first time, having a precious metal background in jewellery making. That was fantastic. And there's just some other images. The same rings as well. And then as the collection basically began to take shape towards the end of the project and my designs progressed, I also felt like I needed to, the plan with the project as well was that I always wanted to get to a stage where I was comfortable enough to start including another material into the work as well. And I was thinking about what material to kind of use. I didn't want to use a metal, I wanted to use something that was non-metallic, that wouldn't be too harsh or too distracting from the rest of the piece. And I decided eventually on using some exotic wood that I'd brought over previously from South Africa. And these were very, very simple elements. Part of the pieces, I used them in bangles and neck pieces for the exhibition. And they were very simply just CNC'd in the industrial design department at the NCAD. and I was quite happy with the way that they turned out. This again allowed me to be able to take some of the wood elements back to the bench. I do all the sanding. It's just great to form that connection as well with the earrings as well. All the little findings were all handmade. I like to have those little kind of final touches to be able to just reconnect with the work. I think that was really good. It was important for me personally as well, just to have that connection. And it's the area that I would see myself going into as I've finished now, as well as I feel like I've just kind of scratched the surface with kind of bridging the two, and I want to bring more kind of handmade elements into the work as well. So a lot of people have asked me how I feel about my experience with 3D printing and how it's changed the way that I practice my jewellery. And since the inclusion of 3D printing and CAD into my practice, I feel there's obviously naturally been a huge considerable change in the way that I've worked, and the way that I approach making, and the way that I see jewellery even. I definitely draw a lot more. I found one of the big differences was that I felt, maybe it was just because initially I was quite intimidated by the computer, but I felt like my designs had to be quite exact. Everything, dimensions, from sizes, everything had to be quite perfect before I sit down at the computer, because there's not a lot of room for error. And obviously, once you've had something printed, there will always there are things that have to change, and it is an ongoing process. But just from that start, I needed to be have a very clear visual idea of what was being made. And sizes, dimensions, everything had to be perfect. And comparing it to the bench, I find obviously the benches are far more, there's a lot more of an intuitive, instinctual method to the making. You can sit down and you form a bond obviously with the piece as well, and that's not there with this kind of making. But on the one hand, it has allowed me to become incredibly productive as well. It's an incredibly efficient way of making, and it's provided me with a skill that I feel has broadened my practice, and it's opened far more doors doors that weren't there initially, obviously. Another great thing is that existing designs can always be altered to suit a client's ring size or arm size for a bangle, and that was a really great thing, being able to talk to customers at the exhibition at NCAD, and being able to say, I can do it like pretty much almost any color that you want. I can change the size for you, that's not a problem. And that was great. And also for the work, I decided to I did things in small editions. I haven't done anything over 10 now. I know there's been a lot of discussion within the craft industry as to how these technologies affect Crossskill. Questions such as, does it contribute to de-skilling? And is it an authentic method of making? And the answers that I'd have with my experience, or what I've just experienced over the last 2 years, is that it's, without my previous jewelry knowledge, I wouldn't have had the experience that I've had, and I think it's really important to have that kind of knowledge. It just depends what you want to make, and how well you want to make it as well, and how effective you want your objects to be. I see it as a very different method of making. It's a very completely different experience. And I don't think, it doesn't take away from it, it doesn't make it any less making, I guess, if that makes sense. I also think quite a general idea has been that because a computer has been involved with the process, is that it's made it quite easy. And I disagree with that. There's still a lot of skill that's involved. That skill still needs to be practiced as much as if you were at a bench as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of work that's involved, and I don't think just because a computer is in the process, it shouldn't take anything away from that. So the way that I look at what I've done is that it's a new tool that I've gained, and that I have experience in using. Hopefully one of many in my toolbox to come. And there are many avenues that I could see myself exploring with this technology. It's taken me quite a while to get my mind around the software and the process of printing and understanding the various materials and so on. But incorporating these skills into my practice will no doubt affect the way in which I will continue to manufacture. And I know that I will continue to just further my experience with using these tools. And it's just broadened my view and outlook on jewellery completely. And I feel that there's far more scope for me as a maker and far more options in the way that I can creatively go out and apply it. So, there you go.